Oh wow, look at that. That's steady. I feel a bit bad because everyone else has got notebooks. And I'm using energy just to read off. I'll add it to my guilt footprint. Hi, I'm Seth. I'm the Artistic Director of Kaleider. It's part of the slow movement. I'm going to tell you a story about a project which we're doing. So just as a brief overview, we are a kind of production studio. We make live experiences. They're often not in auditoriums. We commission other artists to make work, and we make our own work. And we're based in Exeter. Kaleider is a very small team. We have a full-time producer and a part-time general manager, and that's it. We have some freelance staff. And this project started in 2009 when I was sitting in my office, which was in Bristol Old Vic, when I used to work in Bristol, and kind of felt that even when Bristol Old Vic was really buzzing, the whole world didn't go in it, and a lot of the world wouldn't go in it. And so I kind of got to thinking, how do we interrupt people's realities in a meaningful and kind of significant way? And at about the same time, I found myself sitting in a cafe in Tooting, talking to a colleague and friend of mine called Lucy Neal, who was one of the founders of London International Festival of Theatre and ran it for 25 years, very inspirational lady for me. I worked with her very early on in my career, and it was very inspiring. Sitting with her in Tooting, asking her what she was up to, and she was talking about her artistic practice, but she was talking about it in terms of her work with transition tuting. And I'm not very good at listening to what people have to persuade me of. I tend to think the opposite. But Lucy is one person who's very good at persuading me of things, and she persuaded me of the stories of climate change and the stories of oil running out. And I got very interested in the story of oil running out. Not because I thought it was going to necessarily. I suspect it will if we keep using it like we are. But because I was interested in the story. Climate change is a very, very confusing and difficult and nuanced story, narrative. And the idea that oil might run out is pretty straightforward. And then soon after, you see oil in everything, and you either all will have gone through this already, going through it, or will go through it. At the point at which you see everything as energized by oil, it's really, really, really shocking. And it sort of petrifies you. And then I tipped from this position of thinking oil was a dirty, nasty, black, sticky, smelly thing that made the rich richer and the poor poorer, and hated it, to this position of seeing it as this beautiful, incredible, freeing substance that humans have found a use for that allows us to live like we live. And so I got interested in this question, what would we do with the last barrel of oil? And so I decided to make a show about it. And what I'm going to, because the kind of provocation is what's the kind of best experience of climate change and art, I'm just going to take you through what this project's going to be. Because it hasn't happened yet, but it is happening. It's all set up. So we are, this time next year, we'll be about 2 months off, locating 5 huge robots in Exeter, at different places around Exeter. They're what you've just thought of as a robot in your head, not that. We're working with Rory Glynn and William Bowden from University of Central London. They are currently prototyping the robot, which is being paid for by UCL. We're then working with universities of Oxford, Bath, Queen Mary's, Exeter University, UWE, led by PM Studio, in a project called Being There, Robots in Public Spaces, which is using all of academics from across all of those organisations to look at how people respond to robots in public spaces. These robots are going to have sound. They'll play off one score, but they'll be in different parts of the city. They will move very, very slowly. So as George Ferguson says, we will have to open the streets for the robots to move through the city, and they will come together, and when they come together, they will play one score. We have been working with the Met Office, we've been working with Felicity, but Felicity's just been in Brighton this weekend doing a hack, and one of the things she was doing was trying to get people to build a robot that responds to the weather. And we are hopefully going to be involved in the NASA Met Office Space Apps Challenge as well later in the year. And we got to kind of thinking, how do we locate a piece of scale in the city and get people to sort of understand it and have some profundity around it without having to labour the show? And we thought, oh, I know what we do. We get the people who are going to see it to write the show. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a book, and we've got 50 days of work taking artists and scientists and academics into schools to work with kids to make the book. And we're going to make a book of justice, we're going to make a book of love, a book of food, a book of leadership, and a book of technology. And that book is going to be the Book of Ancient Sunlight, with its 5 books. And we are working with 5 writers, dramaturgs, animators to lead that work in schools. We will publish that book later in the year using one of Exeter University's very, very small-scale publisher at the university. We're working with Double Elephant Print Workshop, so the Book of Justice will be a graphic book. So come next year when we do our show, there will be a Book of Ancient Sunlight that will have stories in it, and they'll have stories of food now, stories of food, stories of justice of now, what justice means now, what love means now, what love means in an oil age, what love means when I can fly to the other side of the world, what love means when I can FaceTime my kids, what love means when I can drive home every night from Bristol this week, even though the trains aren't working, just to see my kids. We're working with Sarah Dickinson, who is a fantastic dramaturg across the whole project, but she'll dramaturg each of those workshops going into schools so that feeds back into this main show that we're making with the robots. We're working with Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra to work with communities to make the sound for each of those robots. So they're going to make one score, but with communities, so the sound comes for each robot. So there'll be a robot of food, there'll be a robot of justice, so the music for it will respond to those themes too. We're working with University of Exeter, we're working with Professor Tim Lenton very closely, but with other academics there. We're an associate company of the University of Exeter. We're going to have a PhD on this project that's specifically looking at culture change or cultural change within a city. We are obviously working with Exeter City Council and Devon County Council, although, they don't know it all yet. And we are, Devon Libraries was Library of the Year last year and is an incredibly forward-facing library. They're going to have a fabrications lab in their central library in Exeter, which is, I don't know if any of you know, but it's an MIT space where you can prototype, has 3D printers in it, and then they have an IP. They're going to have an IP centre next to it, very, very forward-thinking library, of which we have a really great association, so we're going to try and get them involved. We've got 2 £10,000 commissions for artists to make work out of the book, Exeter-based artists, so they're going to make. We're working with a filmmaker and a sound artist to do to document the entire process with young people. And we're then going to try and get Exeter Northcote and TEDx to try and program their work, and other programmers to try and program their work into these kind of agendas that we're dealing with. So the reason for telling you all of that list, is we will then have a show. We will have a show, hopefully. We may not, but we will have a show with the 5 robots and they come together. But the point for me about this was that the process is as important as the outcome. So the conversations that we have along the way is as important as this show that we've been pointing at since 2009. I'm going to do this big show called Ancient Sunlight, and sort of pointing at it, going, come on everyone, let's go over here. Whereas actually, what we've got now is a lot of academic institutions, a lot of children, a lot of their families, a lot of other organisations, all on this journey where we all have to have these conversations about what does food mean now in the oil age, what does love mean, what does justice mean. So the point of Ancient Sunlight as a project goes back to Lucy's practice for me as an artist, saying it's about transition. So this practice is about making a really great show in Exeter that interrupts it on a significant scale, but it is also about the transition that you can cause in the process. Thanks.
Can I bring our panel back up? Or we're going to create a panel, so I can bring Nicole and Oliver and Chloe back to the stage. Yeah, that's perfect. You're all going to be squished. We haven't got loads of room. Casual style. Has anyone got a question for Seth, just to start? Just since we gave everyone else.
I just wanted to, I sort of lost the connection between the how you got from the last barrel of oil to the robots.
Yeah, good question, which everyone will ask. The metaphor in the show at the moment is that the 5 separate parts come together to make a whole. The question, what should we do with the last barrel of oil, isn't really about oil, it's about what should we do. So, because, yeah, I don't know how to explain that anymore. It's really about what are we going to do? What are we doing and what are we going to do? And the oil is a provocation, really. It is there now, it probably won't be at some time in the future. It's a provocation rather than it really being about oil.
Okay, well, we're going to open it up to either questions for specific presenters or just reactions or a group question for the panel. So, yeah, in the back there.
It's to do with the last presentation there. You mentioned that the district council didn't really kind of know yet that was happening, although it had engagement. And given that it seemed quite an expansive kind of project that you were outlining, and what are we going to do? Do you consider then that the standard structures of political engagement are irrelevant?
No, they sort of do know. It's really, we wanted to put a water slide down 4 Street in Exeter as a kind of contemporary great conduit. There's an amazing set of tunnels underneath Exeter that carried water in medieval times, and there was this great conduit that came up at the top of 4 Street, and we wanted to kind of make a contemporary great conduit. We were working with Luke Jerram, and it's possible that he might do a version of it in Bristol at some point. But we couldn't locate it. It was just very, very hard. And I think that I think that it's not the case everywhere, but it is harder to open the streets up for things like that in places where you don't have a mayor like George Ferguson who is actively trying to do it. So it's not. We are engaged with them very, very closely, and we are talking to them, and don't think they're irrelevant at all. It's just a negotiation of highways saying we'd rather you didn't do this on a highway, when actually the point is to own the highway for the project. So it's a negotiation. Does that answer your question?
I realise it's an answer to the question, but I mean from recent experience, the things like the Rhythms in Exeter and other their arts projects seem to have been very successful and have been kind of pushing boundaries, so I'm surprised at your answer, even though I understand it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
it's
you.
about risk management probably in the end, I think.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Seth, this has got a practical question. Has it really taken you 5 years to call all those bodies?
No, actually. It's just that was going to locate it in Bristol in 2009. I was still working at Theatre Bristol. I didn't leave until 2010, didn't start Kaleider until 2012. So actually, we've had to move very, very fast to get those together. And we've done that we did that in sort of 18 months, really.
Is that 2 of you doing that?
But yeah. On that project, that's a lot of my historic relationships as well. Though, you know, having a relationship with the university, having a relationship with PM Studio, all of, you know, so it takes a long time, I guess, to get people's trust.
Okay. Does anyone have a general question we might put to our panel here? You said it all. You've answered all of the questions. Yeah. Definitely.
Just across all of the presentations about the beginning, talking about making people feel. I mean, you said actually that this morning, I wasn't here this morning. Making people feel, and the idea of storytelling, desirability, and transition. Those all seem like really closely connected elements for me, and fill me with hope. I think in terms of the use of art to create all of those things in the work that's made in response to the experts of energy or climate change or global warming, whatever it is. But to feel the thing about desirability that I think you said, Ollie, really struck me. That moment where we don't do what Seth described, going, I'm going to think the opposite of what you think. Actually going, wow, I want to be like this. I think that's a huge moment to head for as an artist, to say, how does my work make someone feel like they want to be different and therefore transition? I do that through a story that I tell, where someone feels something. It just feels like a really nice connected sort of model, even for why and how you make art in this sort of realm. So I just was thinking about that.
Yeah, it's a great observation. Anyone to comment? Yes, that's the
Tom Morris said something really good on that this week, I thought, about the value of culture in cities, which was that stories are going to happen anyway. It's how we get involved as artists, which is just a really interesting idea, because he specifically mentioned the Daily Mail and going, that is happening anyway, it's part of our fabric, it's there already. It's how we get involved in telling the stories and what make of them what we want. So, and he was talking about how powerful the power of story is in terms of cultural change and owning city space, basically, civic space.
Anyone else? Yeah. I thought about that.
I think extending from that, someone mentioned the other day,
Sorry, can you speak up, please?
sorry, extending from Seth's point, I was speaking to someone the other day who said, you know, we all have to find ways to avoid being the bad guys in our narratives, and find ways of being the heroes of our own story and our relationship with the world. And I think that's really helpful. So much guilt.
And I'm going to take this question. An apology, a really good suggestion was made of asking people to identify themselves, and everyone nodded and said that's a good idea, and then I completely forgot about that. So can I ask you to start that practice by telling us who you are and then your question?
I'm Liz Lockyer, and I'm sort of director of the Arts and Community Centre, and also project manager for the trail, sculpture trail, environmental trail, 10 years old. My question really is that we talked about being sustainable in arts and therefore financially sustainable. And one of the things that sort of seems to, I wondered how often business, the people that are like a business tradition, how often they actually look out at what's already happening and help collate what's happening outside of their businesses, because quite frequently we listen to amazing projects that are coming up from and almost being not inflicted on us, it's the wrong thing, but they're sort of separate from what's already happening. And I think this thing about sustainability is about collaboration and working with projects that are already possibly out there that need investment and improving, and maybe somebody with an overview coming along and saying, oh, I know somebody who's working on these lines, and making the introduction. And one of the things I find quite difficult to take is that every so often these wonderful projects, like it's just amazing what he's talking about, pop up. And you know, when you've been working away for God knows how many years in the background, and you're almost there, but you need the energy to come in from outside and pick you up and say, come on, we can help you get on with that. And so sometimes we always have sort of like new ideas coming in, and the old ideas are lost.
Mhm.
I just wondered whether they had a comment to make on that.
Can I just hold that question? And because there was a couple of other hands, and I'm keen to get a couple of questions. If we could just hold that thought and take yours.
Karen Pony, West Pine Company and I was just interested a bit more about the carbon audit you did and where you got that information and how you sort of got everyone else into shape to kind of follow.
So it was a PhD student who was carbon auditing several different small businesses in Bath, and we happened to be the arts company that she looked into. But there's increasing numbers of kind of models of ways that you can do that. I think Julie's Bicycle now have a kind of a pro forma template that you can do yourself.
Okay. I don't want to lose your comment and question as well about maybe new projects and old projects. Did anyone have a comment on that when they heard?
I completely agree with you. That's why we're doing our survey, because I completely agree that part of thinking sustainably is making the most of what's already there and what's already out there. So yeah, please.
And I would say that's what we've really tried to do with this project is not put it on top, but get it up and through. Hence, bringing artists in to work in the schools that are existing artists that are doing so much, so they bring them in on the project, but then they might go and do something else off it, which is already happening. That artists are already going off and doing stuff that's associated. We're already feeding artists through it, but it's absolutely about not just plonking it on top, but trying to grow it up through what's the kind of skill base and the intelligence that's already there. Because I think we're very limited if we plonk something like that straight on top. So I agree, and I think it's really important that that's what you do as much as is possible.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a cheeky question. Sorry, I'm Caroline from Kilter Theatre. I'm just interested because you've got two practitioners there and then two people who commission practitioners and artists. I'm interested how important the role when you commission artists is the role of money, and from the perspective of the businesses, do you need to make your money back, and how important is it for the practitioners to be remunerated, to be paid, to live like that? I think for artists and the environment, money is a very funny, tricky subject, and I'm just quite interested because we've got business people who commission artists.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to give a very wishy-washy answer.
Wish-washy.
So we started talking to Matt maybe 2 years ago, and back along when we first started talking about working together, there was no money on the table at all. We're not-for-profit, so in the same way as a creative organisation has to fundraise for the week and find ways of funding things. So I would say my advice would be get to know people and spend time with people, help them understand your work and enter into a conversation, because if you can collaborate in generating the ideas together, you'll get them on board in, being motivated to find money to do stuff. And so I would say if you can reach out beyond, into new networks and have new relationships, you don't necessarily have to have the money straight up. And I would say think long term as well. Projects don't come out of anything quickly in my experience. I mean, other people might have different experiences, but for me, kind of two-year lead-ins is not unusual.
I think that's what slightly makes it expensive from our point of view, is the long run-ins, the efforts to kind of include as many other organisations, the sharing of the process and not just the product makes the product so much bigger that it becomes more expensive and harder to pay for.
I think I don't know the ins and outs of how Ruth's finances work with the curatorship, but
I do know that our outcomes will be related a lot to the project, so certain people engagement targets. And I know that she has been given a pot of money, and I know that she's extended that pot of money through finding funding in different creative ways. But because of the nature of the National Trust, a lot of it is about engagement and how many people and where they've come from and why, and are they likely to come back, and are they likely to become supporters and that sort of thing.
Okay, very last comment or question at the end, and then we need to sum up and have some coffee.
Today, in this environment, it feels quite like a conference. That's good, I suppose it is a conference. how much does anybody think in the room that artists end up putting quite a lot of energy, quite a lot of their creativity into the actual process of the work being commissioned? Yeah, rather than the making,
yeah.
the doing, kind of with people, and it seems to me that there's an increasing demand on. I think it's interesting that Ollie said that they've deliberately made that part of the process, but I think it's not always that creativity is well used in that process. It could better go into doing it.
Yeah.
Can I just talk back to money a minute?
Yeah, back to money.
I feel that I think money is corrosive when it's there and corrosive when it's not. I think that it eclipses humans' ability to think about a world without money because it's so pervasive. I think so that's the first thing. I think that, so therefore it's really difficult to have a discussion about art and money. I personally don't think art, someone said the other day, you're totally wrong about this, I don't think art and money mix that well. However, we need money to eat bread. Or whatever we eat. So I commission as well as make work, if you know what I mean. So it's a kind of interesting tension in that. But Bill Sharp writes very well, academic Bill Sharp talks about pushing money to the margins. So not getting rid of it, not ignoring it, but trying to push it and hold the space in the middle for creativity. So often I find that means actually doing everything you can to not pay for the art too early, but pay for people to live or sustain or whatever. Because the money tends to kill the creativity very quickly. It's what I found, it's my observation. And that's, again, a tension of trying to keep the money back as late as possible until actually it's not that, until it's fuel for the project, not kills it. It's happened to me. I've got money for a project that's killed it because I go, that's the amount of value I can give for that amount of money. And actually, that's not true. But it's very, very hard once it's in the mix to get it out. It's quite corrosive, I think.
Okay. We are just about out of time. Can we bring this discussion for coffee? I'm going to attempt to sum up each of these guys' presentations in 2 sentences. And then I'm going to ask, and you can totally tell me if I misquote you. And then I haven't even told them I'm going to ask them this. I'm going to ask for one wise thought from each of them to spark our conversations over coffee. So, we started with Chloe, who challenged us to combine arts and energy. She told us about her images, mixed thoughts from Chloe on her images. And she invited us to an event. There was a discount code, and also she's got a survey she'd really, really, really like you to fill out. And the survey, I think, is just behind her. Then we heard from Oliver, who told us about Kilter Theatre and some of their low-carbon work. And the phrase I loved was creating a world that the audience wanted to be a part of. I'm excited to see the recycled shed at an allotment near me or soon a museum, and an interesting discussion about taking responsibility for how our audiences travel and what the impact of our production is, not just the messages. Maybe. Nicole filled in very bravely for her colleague, telling us about the Trust's new work in Bristol. She spends her day pressing apples and building dens, jealous, and told us about the contrast of Tintersfield with the nature and the wildlife, and also a big house and how that could be an opportunity. And she invited us down to her new orchard project for a glass of cider. Thank you. We then heard from, in a few years' time, invitation open. Seth told us about interrupting people's reality in a meaningful and significant way, and the complicated story that climate change is.
We heard about the 5 huge robots, and we all laughed when he challenged us about what our robots looked like, and I could probably tell you about mine. And we're all invited, I think, to see the Book of Ancient Sunlight and to be challenged that the process is as important as the outcome. So in that order, if I can ask for a wise thought from each of our panel. No pressure. Chloe.
Connect with energy. Go out and feel the wind and feel the sun and wander in a stream and feel the waves of new creativity coming through.
But after they've completed your questionnaire, right? Ollie.
I don't know how wise it is, but as far as my personal wisdom goes, that's kind of in itself the advice is listen to what you actually personally feel in response to the issues that you're dealing with, and if you tell the truth about how you're feeling, then it's probably going to help someone else. And as a creative person, you might have more time and kind of medium facility to come up with ideas.
Right, thank you. Nicole.
Oh gosh, maybe just that everybody should spend some time building dens.
Okay. Fantastic. Seth?
Yeah, that. I think ask, if you think you know the answer, ask another question, and if you think you don't know the answer, iterate your question.
Brilliant. On that thought, as we go to tea, can we give a huge round of applause to our whole panel here?